All right, as authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any item on the agenda at any time during the meeting. The City of Bastrop reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or called executive session or order or of business at any time prior to adjournment. And with that, let's see, Apple thinks it's 5:08, so I'll call the meeting to order, and we will immediately call the meeting into a work session where we will discuss the ethics ordinance and receive input from citizens. And I believe, City Attorney, the plan is, are you or is City Manager, we had talked about you might introduce a topic as well. Okay. The City Attorney will kick us off, and we absolutely will have an opportunity for citizen input. And I'll tell you now, if you'll please come to the mic. As we all know, there are lots of people that watch at home, and if you'll come to the mic, it'll make it where the people at home can hear us, and it'll make it easier for all of us as well. So with that, Mr. Bragg.
Thank you, ma'am. Mayor, I assume this is on, I guess I can hear. This is really a two-part deal. I'm more a technician in this setting than anything else, because what really goes into creating an ordinance is the policy behind it. What values, policies does the city want to have? Once that's determined, then it becomes my job to put that into language that's understandable and enforceable. So I think the first part of this is going to be a values discussion led by the city manager on those things that the city of Bastrop wants to include in an ethics ordinance. I would like to say one other preliminary thing. The ordinance that I revised was written some time ago, and since then we have moved legally, we've moved into a plain English environment where we're trying to write things so everyone can understand them without having to have a law degree. And so ultimately the goal is to take not only this ordinance but other ordinances and translate them into plain English so that people can easily understand what's there. The whereases and the wherefore, take all that stuff out. That's a laborious process, because in going to plain English, if you're not very, very careful, you can change the meaning of things. And so that's long-term what we want to accomplish. For the short term, I think there's a need to fix a broken ordinance and get it in shape to have it carry us forward until we reach that next stage of being able to make a wholesale change in the structure. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
One of the things that was very helpful is Councilmember Deborah Jones suggested that we use, and I'm going to get his last name incorrect, so I'm going to let Borjacay. Oh, neither one of us did very well. I'm grateful I did not try it, yes. And he really is the father of ethics in the state of Texas. And so at her suggestion, we have asked Alan to review this. And one of the things that he really suggested is that we back the train up just a tad, so to speak, and debate purpose and debate values. Because that really then is a great benchmark, measuring stick, if you will, on what goes in, what comes out, and the why statement. And so I did some quick checking this morning, and the city of McKinney did a great job of not only defining for them a purpose, but for some value and guiding principles. And they had 6 standards. The first was service to the community, treat others with respect, sincerity, and cheerfulness, produce quality results, plan, innovate, and execute tasks efficiently, integrity, to ensure fairness and honesty to guide our work, responsible action, which is to take pride in our work, be accountable for our actions, innovative and problem solving, which was to take the initiative, listen, question, explore, and succeed. And then teamwork was open communication and selfless cooperation as our team goals. And that was there, each one of those spells spirit. And so I think after I studied that, it really spoke to me from an organizational standard, not necessarily just to an ethics ordinance. But the consistent purpose of all of these is to ensure that the citizenry that we are appointed or elected to serve has trust and integrity in the government. And so it's kind of in that context that I would like to have kind of a values discussion. And I will share with the audience, anytime you do this, it's like making sausage. It's not real comfortable to begin with, but the outcome is we ultimately get where we need to be. So maybe the first thing we do is kind of some word associations. And let's think of this in the context of our board and commissioners. You know, what values do we want them to have and share? As employees, what values do we want them to have and to share? And as elected officials, what should our citizenry expect of you from a values perspective? And we can just put things up there, we can have conversation about it, and then narrow it down to hopefully 4 or 5 that make sense, that kind of become some defining elements of this, because I think we shared with you when we debated this with the Ethics Commission, you can what if this to death. You cannot plan for every unforeseen something that's coming along. But these values give the reader, it gives the commission who is going to interpret this kind of a standard of care, if you will. When the law or the rules are silent, what's the expectation? What's the intent? And I think that's really what we need to get out of the values. So with that, if that is as clear as mud, then I will facilitate and let y'all just kind of have a conversation. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, you guys okay? Would it be helpful if I went first with that? Okay. We'll talk about it with the audience. Councilmember McNally is out of the country, and Councilmember Peterson woke up very, very sick today. So that's why they aren't here. So I just wanted everyone to know we have a quorum, so we're moving forward with the meeting, but I wanted you to know where they were. I, too, have read through several ethics ordinances, and it's been quite interesting to dig through the bookshelves in the mayor's office. And one of the things I found was 10 different ethics ordinances that I guess they reviewed before they were doing it. One of the things I noticed was there was quite a bit of plagiarism, but I think it was for a really good cause, in the sense of the following sentence, which I think might really kick us off. It is essential in a democratic system that the public have confidence in the integrity, independence, and impartiality of those who act on their behalf in government. So when we're talking about values, I think integrity, independence, and impartiality, which to me is, not having a conflict of interest, not having a benefit for yourself. The only other one that I would think that we might want to consider is just the plain old-fashioned honesty as being a key one. But I will leave that to the three of you if you agree with those, or if you have other ones or disagree. Any input?
No, that's good stuff. I have one essential thing that I've read through the comments that we got from our citizens, and one was clarity that stood out to me, clarifying the intent of what we were saying. So we need clarity for the citizens, board members, employees, and council.
I agree.
Everybody.
I agree. Deborah, comment?
I really felt like one thing that was lacking in this last, to me, fiasco that I was put through was communication. And You know, for example, and I think I have a right to talk about what I was charged with, not having ethics training. That's not my job. The city sets that up. I don't set that up. That's not my job. So for us to drag the city through this process and cost us thousands and thousands of dollars over something I'm not responsible for. The city's the one that tells me when that's going to happen and where and if I can be there. And so for me to have to defend myself against that charge was a fiasco. And the other thing that was an issue was that there were charges brought with no evidence. Just, this is what I think. And when I was asked about it, it was like, well, what are you talking about? Well, it's what I think. So to cost the city thousands of dollars for what you think, no clear evidence, no ability to communicate. We weren't allowed to speak to each other. David couldn't talk to the commission. Y'all couldn't talk to me. I couldn't talk. I mean, I thought that was ridiculous. So to me, I think it's fundamental that if somebody has a problem, that there be some sort of process that you go through on the front end. Because a lot of those issues could have been resolved, you know, just with Gary. Gary was acting on behalf of council, and he was charged for acting on his own. I mean, that could have very easily been handled. And so these were things that I saw as being very deficient, is just a process. But I think, that being said, I think that's been addressed in that there was a lot of confusion, you know, what council represented who you could retain, or if you would retain someone, you couldn't talk to us because you were and I think that maybe those have been addressed. So, but those were just, to me, it was a very,
Value standpoint, do you think that clarity and communication and in part, do you think that any of those words address that, or do you think that there should be another word on the list?
I think that probably all of those issues right there brought up about why that whole thing failed from the beginning. All of those points.
Mayor, you mentioned to me that you read in the book that somebody had addressed the very concern that Deborah has raised about it not being a weapon.
So it's the city of San Marcos, and they did a policy and purpose, and they had a general policy, a statement, then they had an appearance of impropriety, and from an ethics commission standpoint, it talked about public service is a public trust. All city officials are stewards of that public trust. So it talked about there's an intention and a spirit of the ordinance, if to the point of you can't come up with every single what if. It talked about having the purpose of the ethics ordinance, and then the item D, the fourth thing was, this code of ethics is not intended to be used as a political weapon or to intimidate or embarrass affected persons. The officials charged with administration of this code of ethics shall administer it in a manner that avoids any such use of this code of ethics.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think that you've got to administer the code of ethics with a process in place that allows for complaints to be heard and processed correctly. And so I don't know what that looks like because I'm not an ethics attorney. I don't know if there's no way that you can do that, that the process is the ethics board itself.
One of the things that will park, and when we get to the actual conversation, is making sure that there is an appropriate pre-clearance process that determines that there is evidence to suggest a violation worthy of the ethics commission's time and energy.
Okay, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, it's well said. Thank you.
Right, for the next conversation, we're trying to finish the values first. I will try to keep myself on task as well as the meeting.
Well, you know, because you talk about the whole spirit of the process, and David said this really, really well. I mean, all the council members have a real heart of service and a real heart of wanting to do the right thing for the city. And so I think that when people are acting, you have to put into context what it is they're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, I like the whole idea that you brought that up initially about spirit, the spirit behind, your action.
Gary, any comments?
I'm comfortable with the values that we have here. I do have some, when we get deeper into this, I have some comments on the actual direction of the ordinance that I'd like to address, but I think we're fine with these values.
Okay.
Well, that being said, I want to say this up front. I really think that, to me, what we're doing today is just fixing what we've got. We need a rewrite. We need an ordinance that's done, almost like baking a cake. It's got too much salt in it. We need to start over. And we can fix it, put it on the table, frost it, make it look good. But you know what? I just think that ultimately there needs to be a rewrite of the ordinance.
Alan has suggested that, but I think what he believes is that the ordinance we have needs to be edited.
Yes, in the
And so
meantime.
it's the first place,
Yes.
and you get this to a place that at least it's manageable, and then absolutely he would strongly urge that.
Well, I
But he
just want to be real
recognizes
clear on the front as
Yes,
to where
ma'am.
we're going. This is not the end all, what we're doing here today. This is to get us to where we need to be, in my opinion, which is a rewrite, and I've heard that from several people.
Yeah, Councilmember Jones, I agree with you. What I mentioned earlier was I think it's a Band-Aid, but it is not the solution. But it's an important Band-Aid
Yes.
because what we have needs some clarification to it. They can't hear you.
This is indeed a Band-Aid, but you have an ordinance that right now has critical problems in it that have got to be addressed immediately. It will take longer to do the comprehensive rewrite for the reasons I talked about earlier, but yes, there's agreement that this is just a Band-Aid. It needs more work.
So my intention would be that when we have our council retreat, that this is one of the items that we set a timeline to do a rewrite. That we get this Band-Aid in place, have something on the book so the Ethics Commission has something to go by, but that we address it with our needs as we move forward, and in the retreat, we'll put a timeline to it and set our expectations, and that'll require us to make some priority changes or priority decisions with other items, but I think that's how we're moving forward. Gary and Bill, are you okay with that process? All right, Ms. Humble, is there anything else we need to do?
No, ma'am, I will listen to the conversation, and if there are other things that appear, I'll write them into different color ink, and before in the evening, we can go back after the conversation and validate and see if we need all of these, or if the ones that got put up here are good additions or not. So just when you see me up there, I'm making notes for final thoughts.
Excellent. Mr. Bragg, I think we're to you.
All right.
And for the audience, if you can't see it on this TV, we've also got it on the big screen, so.
The thing that I think, and this is very foundational kind of stuff, but everybody has ethics guidelines, no matter who you are or what you are, and they all differ slightly depending on what the particular thing is. Mary Huber has ethical guidelines. I have ethical guidelines. They're different because we deal with different things, but they all have the same basic thing. It's moral principles governing a person's behavior. And in a shorthand form, you can take probably every ethics ordinance there is and boil it down to 3 words: don't lie, cheat, or steal. That's basically what they're all about in one form or another. In Bastrop, and I'm going to talk today about the 2 things, or talk with you about 2 things: ethical standards that our code establishes, and then the enforcement of those ethical standards. Before we begin any of this, one of the things that Congressman McAnally raised, which was important, I think, and that is, what's the definition of a city official under our ordinance? And under our ordinance, it does not include anyone who reports to the city manager, because that's dealt with by city personnel policies, and under our charter, she has exclusive jurisdiction.
And I've asked her to explain that a little bit better so that we have clarity with the audience and with all of council.
When we started the conversation, one of the things that we needed to clarify, and that is the Ethics Commission's review and oversight of all things ethics. The charter is very clear that employees report to the city manager. So one of the things that the mayor and I talked about is I don't want the perspective to be that staff is not going to follow the city's ethics ordinance, because that is not true. We absolutely will. We just will not do it through the Ethics Commission. It will be incorporated into our personnel policy and administered then on a staff level per the charter. So when this is adopted, it should be adopted from the perspective that the expectation is that staff will act in a very ethical manner. But where me, David, and you get to debate ethics, if questioned, is front of the commission. If staff is ever questioned ethically, there will be an internal process that will be dealt with from an organizational standpoint in the personnel policy. So I don't want people to think that we're not going to be held to that standard. We're just not going to go through the Ethics Commission to be held to that standard, just for clarification.
And Judge Dugan, that makes sense in your opinion?
I cited the charter provision down at the bottom that does in fact confer on the city manager the sole authority to deal with those issues.
I read the
And please lean into the mic. The IT staff is telling me folks at home are not hearing very well if we're not really talking into the mic.
Not now. Okay. Now we're working. I kind of had the same thought Connor did when I read this paragraph. We go into descriptions of city attorney, city secretary, all city department directors, police chief, fire marshal, and persons acting in capacity, blah, 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 unless that person reports to the city manager. Well, all department directors report to the city manager. So I'm wondering if that paragraph could be rewritten to clarify.
Yes.
It can be rewritten. Obviously, one of the other interesting features of the charter is the charter actually uses that y'all have the authority to fire employees. What does that mean? Well, that means that theoretically y'all could hire an employee, although I'm not sure how. But we've got some confusing language. So yes, that can be fixed and made to be more clear, certainly.
There is also some state law definitions of what constitutes a city official that is different than a city employee. And so we need to go back and make sure that we get clarity on that. So when it comes back to you, we will be able to tell you specifically where that came from.
Great. Under our code of ethics, this code focuses on these areas by establishing ethical standards for each of those areas. It deals with some of them more so than others. The gifts thing, for example, is you referred to the penal code for seeing what's right and what's wrong about that, and it's something I encourage you to read because it's a very frightening provision when you're a public official. Basically, you can't take anything from anybody. But anyway, so these are the things. And what I've done in this presentation, because of limited time, is I'm going to try to focus on the things that are radical kind of changes or different had before. And for example, this is a policy issue that y'all need to decide. Representation before city council, boards, commissions, or task forces. A city official who's serving only as an appointed member of a board may represent others before the city council. boards, bodies, if it's a matter not related directly or indirectly to his or her duties. The balancing act has to be the availability of people to serve on boards and commissions, and by depriving them of their ability to otherwise do work that might involve an unrelated city entity, do y'all want to do that? Or do you just want to make a flat prohibition? So that's one of the policy issues that needs to be resolved in this particular.
We want to stop the debate as we go. Yes.
Getting picked up. Okay. For the definition of a city official, has that already been defined, or are we following the definition that the Texas Ethics Commission has defined?
Well, right now we'll follow the one that's in the ordinance, because changing the definition of city official is not probably going to change how this is applied right now. It's not going to be applied to city employees, in other words.
Okay, so it's basically mayor, mayor pro tem, council members, city attorney, city secretary.
And boards and commission members.
And boards and commission members.
That becomes a real challenge in a small community when you want us to shop locally, to David's point. When you don't have a large pool of applicants, for instance, if you're in Garland with 350,000 people, it's easier to get people to select from that don't require their net to be cast in a small geographical space. But if you have boards that require attorney representation, and some of our boards are very specific as to the professions that have to serve, and you've got an attorney in town whose client base is predominantly Bastrop County, then you've put that person in a unique position, to David's point, to say you can't ever do this. So you could potentially be causing some loss of real skill set, local institutional knowledge, with a thou shalt not. And I think that's what David is saying to you, that you have to decide, is it an all or nothing, or is it a sometimes? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. We just have to clarify it and then be able to defend what that is. But I think that is a really important piece for you to discuss, given our size and our growth patterns and all of that.
Because it's funny, I was thinking about that earlier today, because in our society we've gotten to a place where people that are the most competent to help you or to answer questions are forced not to, because nobody wants them to have liability. And that's frustrating. So is there a way, again, on this, that there can be some sort of tempering? So for example, let's say somebody has approached a board member or a council member and asked their assistance on something. Couldn't they take that before the city attorney or before the city manager or before the mayor and say, look, this is what I've been asked to do. Is this reasonable?
Yeah. And
sort of have a reasonableness test on it. And so make a provision for that, so that before you stand up in front of everybody and embarrass yourself and say something you probably shouldn't have, then you've been advised to either get out or to not address certain points.
Right, and I'm authorized to give that kind of an opinion under the ordinances. Let me give you an example of what I had in mind when we were talking about this. One extreme is me. Obviously, I can't represent anybody that has anything to do with the city. That's clear. But Lisa Patterson is attorney on planning and zoning. Could she not represent a client before the cemetery board if there was a matter there? Because it has absolutely nothing to do with what she has jurisdiction over. That's the two ends of the spectrum. And I would hate to see us cut off all of it, you see. But somewhere in the middle there's got to be like you're saying, a reasonable.
I'd like to suggest a somewhere in the middle. Councilmember Ennis and I were at CAPCOG training last week, and what they talked a lot about in the ethics portion was disclosure. So to your point of, as long as it's disclosed, and if you fill out the conflict disclosure, it doesn't mean that you can't represent them. It means that you don't pretend that you're hiding that you represent it. You just say, yes, I have, it's a small town and I've dealt with them in this manner. And is that how you're remembering our training as well, Councilmember Ennis? So I think that disclosure and the conflict disclosure, to me, that goes back to our clarity and our communication value, that everybody knows what the cards are on the table. And then if there is an opinion that that's too much of a conflict, then I would think our city attorney would step in or, and give some advice. But from a day-to-day, it seems to me just being clear about all of the disclosure. And it was, I believe Councilmember Ennis and I, at one point I said, I'm not sure I can ride back to Bastrop with you in the car, but they were very, very clear. I believe it was House Bill 23 from the session that ended in June of 2015. They're real clear about the forms, and so I would recommend that as a middle ground. Does that seem to suffice, Councilmember Jones? Yes.
I personally don't think we should make any changes out of this outside of adding a clause that talks about the disclosure. If we have this situation.
Almost like a scope of work disclosure, like this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I've been asked to represent.
The only caution I would give is giving someone like me too much discretion in an area like that. Is it too much involvement? Is it not enough? That's a very squishy thing. And without some kind of guideline, isn't that a legal term,
At
squishy?
squishy, I'm going to Judge Dugan with squishy. And got any advice for us?
Well, I, of course, have known that I don't have a problem with giving that discretion to Mr. Bragg as the city attorney. I've known him for 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, something
Long
like
time.
that. So I would have no problem with that. I agree with that example. I was thinking, what if somebody's serving on the Parks Board and then wants a variance, they're an attorney and they want to represent something on a variance for a house deal, to prohibit that person from coming and saying, we're asking for this variance, has nothing at all to do with parks. So to keep them from being on a board, but some kind of disclosure, and, certainly, I certainly don't have a problem just personally myself. I can't speak for the commission. I'm not speaking for the commission, just myself personally. I would have no problem with David looking at that and saying, no, that's way too close. You are on, one of the boards that does decide variances. No, you should not be coming in front of the city council asking for a variance. Somebody else needs to do that. But we make those close calls in court all the time, and so I certainly don't have a problem with that, even if it is a little squishy.
Right now, if just having the disclosure, short of, hey, I'm on the Parks Board and keep going, but to fill out the paperwork, it's public information, you've disclosed, you're clear, you've communicated, that seems like a step in the right direction to me.
What are you trying to accomplish? So I just think that there has to be some consideration towards your intent.
Evidently, the state law is fairly clear. Didn't you?
Yeah, it didn't sound like it was, if you kind of feel like it was a legal requirement from Texas.
Oh, yeah, and that's
Ethics
why I
Commission.
took one of the sections out of our ordinance, because you have the state law that already requires the disclosure form and all of that. Let me move, because we're going to run out of time, I'm afraid. And so basically, the idea would be keep this as it is, but implement the other sections of the ordinances which allow people to come to me to get an opinion on whether something is or is not too close. Is that my understanding?
Well, I think it can be just an added sentence that they may represent someone, but they must fill out the required disclosure.
Okay.
And maybe that part of that process is you just reviewing that disclosure.
Okay.
Whatever legal stuff, like they have to disclose it before they present, that kind of, that other wiggly room, but there's no point in disclosing it 2 months after somebody caught you, you know, I mean, that's defeating the purpose, so.
All right, this next one has to do with representation in litigation adverse to the city. It obviously applies primarily to attorneys, although it could also apply to engineers or appraisers, depending on what their role is in litigation. Again, the idea is that if you are disqualified solely because you're a member of a board or commission, then that's not enough. There has to be more than that, either within your jurisdiction or something along those lines. But again, is this something that y'all are comfortable with, or would you say that anyone on any city board should not be allowed to participate in litigation in which the city is adverse?
How is this different from what we were just talking about?
It's actual litigation, which is kind of like a notch above, you know. You're actually doing battle with
You're
the
not
city.
just representing, you're suing.
Yeah, you're doing battle with the city. And
But, so you're saying that an attorney could come to a board or to the council and make a pitch for a client, but if it got into litigation, that attorney couldn't go further with it?
no, it'd be only if that person were a member of a board or a commission.
That's what I'm saying. So
Okay.
what I'm getting, let's go back to Lisa Patterson.
Mhm.
Lisa Patterson comes to pitch something totally unrelated to planning and zoning. It goes into litigation. And does she have to step aside? That's why I relate these two together, just because of your example.
Yeah, and that's your policy decision. Does she have to step aside or not?
And I'm with Gary, that doesn't, then I'm not hiring Lisa if she has to,
That's-
you know what I mean? If
that's
she
where-
can't
that's
bring it
where I'm-
home, then.
That's where I'm going, and that is that if you start, where do you draw the line? You know, you say, well, you can bring it up to this point, but you can't. And to me, if it's truly unrelated to what her position is on the board, I don't think it should make any difference. To me, it's no different. We're just, I don't say arbitrarily, but I see it as a somewhat arbitrary line that says, you know, if it gets to, this is the line in the sand, it gets to that line, you got to step aside, puts that person in a very awkward position. And as the mayor says, why would I even bring that attorney into it if I know that that person can only bring me this far? It's an awkward.
If it is determined that that attorney is acting in less than appropriate manners, I will draw your attention to your board and commission ordinance that says all of these appointments are at will and they can be removed at any time. So they are welcome to do this at their own risk, but if they are doing anything other than what the standard of appropriate and reasonable is, then you have the ability to deal with that. But I wouldn't remove from citizenry the ability to hold you accountable.
I think we're in violent agreement. Go ahead, Councilmember Ennis.
Well, I want to make sure we understand what we're talking about. We're talking about the breadth and width, the scope of the definition of city officials and employees. This, if we're talking like this, that gives the city council the right to sue the city, does it not? If I was an attorney, of course, there's that in which
You would be in a different position because you've got jurisdiction over everything. I mean, there's hardly anything that could come up in the city that you wouldn't have some kind of jurisdiction over. So I think a council member would. Let me play devil's advocate though, and I do this only because this is what I read, you know, and I don't necessarily agree with it. If you are in litigation, if you are a board or a commission member, you develop relationships with the city, relationships that others typically don't have. The city's secretary may become your friend because, you know, and those relationships may give an unfair advantage to somebody suing the city. That's one of the other things in the background of this kind of prohibition that tries to keep that from happening. And to me, again, it's something that's unenforceable, but, you know, that's the thinking behind the process.
Well, then we go back to our ethics ordinance.
And people I just think you have to, I mean, I personally am asked to do work all the time that might relate to the city, and I turn it down. As Linda so eloquently pointed out to me right after she got here, I'm the one that chose to run for this position. You know, it's just the way it is. And so, if you do choose to do it, I think you have to really have these driven home whenever the city sets up that training, and maybe recuse yourself from that committee or that board during the process if it gets to that level, because I don't think you're talking about something that's going to happen all the time. It's going to be very random. And so if that happens, you're just, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You're like, you know what, this is going to litigation, it's my client, this is my livelihood, I'm just going to step aside. I don't really think that there's anything wrong with that. So you deal with disclosure, you deal with a clause at some point where it's like, they have to step down. And it's just the way it is. But I don't think that you should keep people, if they feel like they're acting appropriately, if they've disclosed it, from making a living.
Yes, because although those of us sitting at the table get paid, not much, we might add, and that's fine because we chose, knowing that all of the people on those boards and commissions, that is completely voluntary. So I want you to volunteer your time, and I want to keep you from having the ability to make a living. I mean, we just have to balance.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think
I'm
that's what
certainly
you're
not
trying to
saying that.
avoid against.
Yeah.
We're saying disclose, be clear, but we shouldn't impede people's ability to do their lives
Absolutely.
day to day.
Okay, so basically, as I understand, you're basically satisfied with this ordinance and this language, is that correct? And this part of the ordinance?
Would you just want to add something on there about, you would encourage, well, and that might just not be appropriate, for someone to step down if there's any sort of, you know, just so that that's part of it, part of the training, just that they know that, look, if it gets close, you just need to step down.
All right, again, the ethical standard this time deals with confidential information, first executive sessions, and second pending litigation. The state legislature has decided in its wisdom that information discussed in executive session may be discussed outside among the public by not having any penalty for someone doing that. If that occurred in Bastrop, we could not do anything about it. Cities who have encountered this problem before some have chosen to deal with that issue by putting it into their code of ordinances, making it a prohibition to discuss anything outside of executive session that's in executive. And if you do, then it's a violation of the ethics ordinance, which carries with it, some serious penalties. It's a free speech issue. It's tied into it. It is a common sense issue tied into it. As a reality, from my relatively brief experience, there are times when talking is actually helpful to the city. But anyway, that's the issue that's before you, is whether you should or should not have a prohibition against discussing anything outside of executive session.
There would be a couple of caveats that I would offer as perspective to your discussion. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And as elected officials, yes, you enjoy a level of freedom of speech that staff does not. But you were elected and entrusted to be fiscal stewards of the public's pocketbook. And when information in executive session is shared in a way that could negatively impact the position of power of the city, that ends up costing the taxpayers money, I'm back to just because you can doesn't mean you should. So as y'all debate that, please understand the freedom of speech you enjoy compromises the stewardship of the oath you took to protect the integrity of the whole and the system as we know it. So just as let that kind of be the boundaries of the bumper cars as y'all debate that.
And then the only other thing that I would add to that is my understanding there is legislative, very strict guidelines of what can and should be discussed in executive session. And if you stay to only those items, then to me, it makes that conversation even a little bit easier.
Yes, and once you talk about it, you've waived any privilege we have.
Yeah, that's the
So-
problem.
So the minutes, one of you talk about it, we've lost the privilege. You have waived his ability to protect it, period. One of the things that I would say to you relative to the position of sometimes it's in our best interest to talk about it, then collectively decide to do that. Don't individually do it for the city as a group.
Which would get us back to having the value of communication and integrity and impartiality. If during that time we all agree, you know what, we really can say what we decided or why we decided it or whatever, then we would do that under the auspice of coming out as a result of the executive session and share that information all at the same time.
So, and see, this is something I think that's very important, is when we do have executive session, that it's wrapped up with a discussion on what are we going to release from the dais, because I do believe the public has a right to know. Obviously, you don't want to release things that are going to be hurtful or damaging. That's ridiculous. But I do think it's important for the council to collectively vote at the end of executive and say, these are the points that we are going to announce to the public at the end of the session. That's it.
The actions, right? The actions.
Yeah, and you wouldn't want to vote on it. Obviously, you would want to reach a consensus on what
Yes,
you
reach,
could.
okay, maybe it's
Come
not
out
a
here-
vote, but it's a consensus,
Yeah,
yes,
come out here and
absolutely.
vote on it. And then, but I would suggest then that we add a phrase at the bottom of that which says, unless authorized by city council. And that way, you would have to have a vote out here to authorize the release of what's discussed in executive session.
And then by definition, if it can be released, it will be released. It'll be released with a vote, and if it was discussed and it wasn't released, it means it's still confidential
That's right.
until such time that it can be released.
Right. And see, and all that too ties very strongly into something that when we hired Linda, we all talked about as a council, which is that we have a public relations director, we have a person that kind of manages that information that goes out, and then as a council, we authorize that. But it's really important that we get as much information out as is reasonable, in my opinion, to the public on why we make decisions that we make. And if it's not agreed on, then it can't happen.
I have one, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Mr. I have one question for council. Is there anything about, is timeliness of value? Is there, time is
Yes,
of the
that's a
essence?
really
And
good-
I would, because,
Yeah, you don't want people coming back 7, 8, 10.
and timeliness on all perspectives. If it can be released, release it. Don't wait 6 months. If there's a problem,
Absolutely.
it needs to be. So I think a lot of things, a guideline for the attorney as we're doing the ordinance is we should be doing things in a timely manner. I think we have a question from the audience, but I'm going to let Councilmember Ennis go first.
Well, I'm fine with these the way they are, but I'm also fine with adding that statement. I just want to I'll go back to clarity again, that there's no wiggle room on how we define that.
I don't believe so, no, unless you've got a vote saying, based on the consensus of council, we're going to allow public discussion of X. You do that knowing you're waiving the privilege. I mean, you know the privilege is gone, but you're doing it intentionally for a purpose, and you're doing it as a group. And so that I think, fixes any issue.
Yeah. I'd like to add a definition in here, in D, under pending litigation. It says may not discuss. I'd like to define the word discuss because of a previous situation. To me, a discussion is a dialogue. It's a two-way. You're giving information and collecting information. I don't think that item D should prevent us from collecting information upon which we will be making decisions.
If y'all are ready to move to item D, I have real mixed emotions about this provision. And I tried to word it in a way that hopefully responded to that. One of the most valuable assets in litigation involving the city are individual members of the city council who have a relationship, who have knowledge. And I'm not going to mention names because this is all being broadcast, but we had one case in particular where there was no discussion of the merits of a case, but there was a continual relationship of staying in touch, being open to listening, that allowed us ultimately to settle that case. And that's why I don't want to foreclose, discussions, because they can be enormously helpful. I put the caveat with my authorization or the city manager, just so we know what's going on and we're given a chance to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we ought not do that. But with that, that's.
I believe we have a question from the audience, and then I don't want to avoid that, but I'm trying to, she may be wanting to comment on C. There you go, I think.
Thank you. I think my comment has to do, could apply both to C and D. I've heard some people say, well, you can talk about it while you have an executive session to begin with. Well, obviously, there are reasons why you do. But if, before someone could continue discussions with somebody with whom they have a relationship, I don't think you do that unilaterally. You should only do that if, after discussion and agreement by the city council members with the full knowledge of the city attorney and the manager. Because you don't want somebody unilaterally, just because I know Joe Blow and he may be wanting to sue us, and if I talk to him, maybe they won't. I think it's dangerous if you do something unilaterally without the input of the entire council, attorney, and the manager. And, whether you clarify that in writing, or, because we got to realize down the road, you guys aren't always going to be on the council. And if it's in black and white in writing, then we understand for everybody in perpetuity that you don't go out on your own.
So you don't want it to be a practice that becomes institutional knowledge. You want to make sure that the ordinance stands on its own.
I would like to just respond to that if I could. One of my jobs is to try and intercept things before they happen, hopefully. And when I get wind of something that's about to happen, I really don't want to have to convene a meeting of the city council in order to deal with that. I prefer to be able to call the mayor and say, hey, don't you know this person? Could you just talk to them about this and let me know, what the situation, and that's what I'm talking about, is not, is where it's helpful to the city to be able to act quickly and, use the personal resources we've got on the council to try and achieve that. At the same time, I appreciate the idea of not wanting someone to act unilaterally. But I don't want to get us boxed in where we can't move quickly and effectively to try and stop things before they get too far down the road.
And I totally agree with that, and that sometimes we say things when we don't know what the ramifications may be because of lack of training in litigation or in lack of experience with, I just put my foot in it and the city might now be liable for something that I didn't mean to do. So, but I agree with you that timeliness is often very important.
I think what you're talking about, David, is kind of before the fact. If we get into litigation or we've already had executive session, that's when we get into what Deb's talking about, I think.
Right. And I think
trying to solve the issue once it becomes under our nose, whereas you're talking about something out here.
Something that happens before, or sometimes even during, a case, and I have one in mind, can go in 6 different directions, and you might be able to stop 5 of them, but not one. But if it's in litigation, my preference would be not to have any council member talk to anybody without me knowing about it first. That would be my preference, and without me or without the city manager knowing about it first. That would be my preference, and I think that's what this does, is it says just don't discuss pending litigation. But if we added don't discuss the merits, would that solve your issue?
Yeah, I think as people call us,
Sure.
you can't just slam the phone down when somebody calls you. If they want to just pour their guts out, as long as you don't respond and say, well, what we were thinking was, but just allows you to just listen. And I think it is important that, hey, you get that call the city attorney and say, hey, I got a call last night from Joe Blow, and he said that na-na-na-na-na-na-na, and he just poured his guts out, and I collected all this notes, I collected all this information. I didn't disseminate anything. I'm saying a one-way, a monologue coming from a constituent should not be considered a violation of our ordinance,
Right.
because that's what we're here for. We're here to listen to them. If somebody's got a gripe, we should be able to hear what they've got to say. We shouldn't be arguing the case, because that's your job, but we got to be able to listen, because sometimes we have knowledge. I mean, we were elected because we have knowledge of this community. We have knowledge that not everybody has. So when somebody calls us individually, they'll probably call us because we know more about that situation or whatever than somebody else. We should be able to at least listen and then come back to you and say, hey, here's what we heard. And that absolutely not be a violation of our ordinance.
Yeah, and I understand that, and my suggestion would not work, because anybody who's calling you clearly is going to want to talk to you about the merits. You don't necessarily want to talk to them about the merits from the city's point of view. I'm not sure how to word that yet, but let me work on getting that worded correctly.
What's making me nervous about this, and Judge Dugan, if you would chime in if you have an opinion on it, because I see you sitting so quietly in the corner, is I'll go back to what Linda said. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, because even if you don't say a word, they've now gone into the community and said, I got Gary on my side. I spent an hour on the phone with him last night. And you say, well, but it was only 30 minutes and I didn't say, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think there's a difference between pending litigation or we're in litigation. And I was, in my mind, and I thought it was interesting that you're asking for a definition of discussion. If it's an executive session, to me, that's really it's what's discussed in executive session, unless we agree it can be released to the public. I don't think you need to be having even one-way conversations about that information.
Well, I'm going to weigh in, and what was the squishy, I think is what I'm fixing to make this. I think, to Gary's point, it depends on where in litigation we are. Unfortunately, there is so much programming on television and so many daytime attorneys that advertise, pick up the phone and call and I can help you, that I find sometimes that citizens jump from A to Z and they file a lawsuit because they don't think people will listen. And so we get sued when, if they just pick up the phone and call Gary and have a running monologue and just, oh my God, I don't know what to do, and then he picks up the phone and calls me, or he calls David, and we go, boy, there is a lot of opportunity to sit down and have a discussion. And so we could have a mediation, if you will, before we do much in the way of discovery and spend a lot of money to get to the same place that we could get, because they felt comfortable enough to call Gary, but somebody told them, well, you just need to sue the city. And I've been managing litigation for cities for 22 years, and it's surprising to me how many people just start there, when really all they needed to do was pick up the phone and say, we're not happy. So I think the squishiness is, it depends on where in the process we are. If we've just been served, and I did that because nobody was paying attention to me, now Gary's going to pay attention. I've been trying to call you for 3 years and you wouldn't take my call. Now that I've sued you, by God, you're willing to listen to me. Yes, ma'am, I am. Start talking. So whatever the case may be, I think that there is a place, but there is a place where we just reach a point of no return, and we've kicked that can, we've beat that horse, whatever analogy you want, to the point that dialogue's no longer appropriate, monologue's no longer appropriate. We need somebody to settle this for us. So I think that comes back to the discretion of why you have a city attorney.
So Gary, are you okay with how D is written, or not really?
Yeah, I mean,
or are you
still,
squishy on it?
It's pretty squishy.
term of the night.
If I could chime in, and this is, once again, just my personal opinion, if the lawsuit has been filed, that is pending litigation, obviously. The squishy part is somebody is thinking about filing a lawsuit, and I totally agree with council membership. If they're thinking about the lawsuit, that they want to call him up, he ought to have that ability to talk to that constituent about what is the situation, gather the facts. That's not pending litigation, just thinking about it. The squishy part that hearing the discussion is, what if they have sent a demand letter to the city of Bastrop? They have not actually sued. So that gets in a little bit of that area. I'm sending a demand letter asking, but me personally, that is not pending litigation. They have just sent a letter to the city, hey, I want, whatever. Pending litigation means the lawsuit has been filed. So if y'all have constituents, to me, that would definitely, in my simple, humble opinion, would not be any kind of violation. Y'all discuss, because, once again, that's what y'all are elected for,
Right.
is to talk to the constituents.
There's no way around it.
And I wholeheartedly want that, because I want less litigation in my court. So I would rather y'all be able to communicate. But if there has been a lawsuit filed, the worst case scenario for an attorney, and I'm just speaking in general, not with regard, is to have a client start talking to the other side without the attorney knowing, and I know it happens a lot, in cases in my court, and it just, I'll get something filed and I'll ask the attorneys, hey, did you know your client filed this in the district clerk's office? And you see that look of complete horror on the attorney's face. So if it's pending litigation, if you talk to
needs to be involved.
David needs to be involved, or the city attorney needs to be involved.
I have actually gone to court on two separate occasions. No, I've gone to mediation and court on two separate occasions where I drove the plaintiff or I rode with the plaintiff to court. Sometimes the rules that we have to follow are so vague that sometimes the only way you can get something settled is to sue. And so, again, back to the squishiness, I don't know that there is a right answer, but I think the monologue early and involving David keeps the avenues open, because at some point in time, when they call and want to talk, you just need to say, I'm sorry, I really cannot speak to that issue anymore. Your attorney needs to contact our city attorney. I'm sorry. I know I'm your elected official, but I'm not in a position anymore to talk about that. But every situation is so unique and so different that this is one of these things that there's not going to be a thou shalt not provision here.
It all comes back down to communication.
And
that's
the
what
pending
you're-
litigation
that's what
seems to be
you're
a,
setting forth right there.
yeah.
Well, we have to have a good understanding what pending litigation is.
When
I
a
mean,
lawsuit's filed.
When the lawsuit's filed, okay.
And when one's filed, you'll let us know.
Maybe definition up front what pending so.
Or a demand letter has been issued giving us notice and protecting their right to sue us. That is pending litigation.
That's correct from a strategic point of view. Pending litigation, if the lawsuit's been filed, if someone sued us, 99% of the time I can stop them from talking to anybody, because it's unethical for them to call my client without me being involved. So if the lawsuit's filed, I've got a lot more control over it. Prior to that, after the receipt of a demand letter, that's your window of opportunity to get things resolved and settled if they haven't been worked on up to that point.
I just want to make sure we're clear on this, because like Deb said, we're not always going to be sitting here. Of course, we're going to be rewriting this, but we're not all going to be sitting here, and we want to make sure that the folks that come behind us understand the intent we had in this particular aspect.
Well, we can define pending litigation to include from the receipt of a demand letter or filing of a petition, and that would.
Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine having an adequate definition here so that we know what the rules of the road are. I mean, if the rules are that if after a demand letter or litigation has started, that we cannot even basically open our ears to hear, or that we have to immediately advise the constituent we can't deal with it.
Not necessarily. What I
Okay.
would envision, what I hope would happen is you get a call from a constituent and you don't take the call at that moment for whatever reason. You then call me and say, this is what I've been called, who I've been called by, and this is what it's going to relate to, and let me help decide whether that's something that would be helpful
All right.
or not to the city.
But if you pick up the phone and they're there, then the question, I just want to know,
What do you do?
what are we establishing as the standard? What do we as a group decide is the right action? We just say, I'm sorry, I cannot discuss that issue at all. I can't even listen to your issues without your attorney going to our attorney.
Why not just say to the person, before I talk to you about that, would you mind if I called our city attorney to make sure I'm not overstepping a bound or something?
And we can do that.
You can have-
I'm
you can
just
do it that way.
saying.
How about the
we need
proactive
to do-
approach
we just-
of
I
if-
want it
Because
really
there's
clear.
either been a demand letter or a lawsuit, or we're not even in that paragraph.
No, that's true.
So if there's been a demand letter, I would think that it would behoove the city attorney, whoever the city attorney is at the time, to let the council know, whoever the council
Immediately.
is at the time, immediately. And a part of that needs to be, we have a demand letter and there is no communication, or there is a demand letter and I will be reaching out to XYZ council members and we will discuss it at the next executive session. But I would, for me personally, because it's not the phone call, it's you ran into them at the soccer fields and they cornered you, and it's Saturday and David ain't answering his phone. So I would rather, you're the person, the city attorney position is going to know before anybody else that there's been a demand letter or something that gets us into that paragraph. And I think for us to know that we're doing the right thing, we have an ability to talk with our constituents until the city attorney tells us not to.
But the city attorney has told you that we're in litigation, we got a demand letter, whatever it is, and they run into you at the soccer field, and they still want to spill their guts. And, I mean, you run as fast as you can. I'm telling, this is
I know.
a real situation. You've got somebody coming at you. You've known this person for 30 years. They want to spill their guts at you, and there's nothing you can say to just stop them in a public venue from yelling whatever they want at you.
Judge Dugan.
Welcome to my world. No, it actually makes it a lot easier. You just respectfully say, I cannot talk about that as a judge. They come up to me at the HEB. They come up to me at restaurants. They come up to me, I don't go to the soccer field, but they will come up to me, and I am ethically prohibited from talking about any pending litigation, period, in any of my cases. And I say, sorry, can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. And it's frustrating for that person but I voted for you. And I get that. And I said, I as a judge, I cannot ethically talk to you about this. I apologize. And it's.
But I think it's more obvious, because, we've seen the courts on, we've seen,
Right.
if we haven't been involved in court, we've seen it on TV, the separation there, but not so much on the city council,
Well,
so.
don't
I
worry about it.
know
We're
why
gonna
we
get
can't
great
do what
training.
Linda and David have said, which, if somebody comes up to you and they're just like, you know what, I just want to point out this, that, and so forth, and you're like, okay, that's great, I can't discuss it with you, but I'll certainly make sure that I call David tomorrow and let him know, and if there's anything else I can do for you, I'll let you know. I mean, I don't know, and I'm with Gary, I don't know what stops you from listening politely. That's what we're supposed to do, especially when it's citizens. Now, if it's a developer or if it's a contractor or somebody that's bidding, I think that would be probably much, much different. But if it's a citizen, as long as you don't
I
respond.
think the developers believe they're citizens as well, just, you know, we
Well,
gotta be
and I'm
careful.
sorry, but I mean like maybe somebody from out of town that's doing a huge thing and they're trying to, and I don't know, never
Well,
mind. Just,
There's an unspoken problem here that I don't know how you address, but, you know, there's a very good reason why hearsay is not allowed as evidence in court, because people hear things differently. And I could hear the conversation now. Well, Deborah Jones told me that, you know, and it may be something 180 degrees from what you actually said. That's the risk, is that you bring that into a lawsuit and you bring it into the discussion. And I'm not sure how you respond to that other than just having, as a matter of policy, I think we can have a copy of any demand letter we receive sent to you immediately so that you know what we've got.
And once again, it's that situation where either the demand letter or a lawsuit's been filed. I mean, this citizen, and like Linda said, you know, maybe they, with city council members of years ago, wouldn't listen and just do whatever they want. And finally they got to the point, well, I'm just going to sue them to get people to listen. But it's only in the situation of pending litigation. And if you think about it, you know, a demand letter has been sent to the city of Bastrop asking for $400,000. And so they're the citizens of the city of Bastrop have now, maybe there's $400,000 on the table. And so when there's pending litigation, you say, I can't talk about it. And David's exactly right. Say you're seen at the soccer field talking to the person and say this is a not so credible person, and they said, oh, I was talking to the council member, I was talking to the mayor, and they said X, Y, and Z. And it's just totally fabricated, but it's so much easier to say, I can't talk about it. Only, and this is the situation of pending litigation. If it's even before that pending litigation, before that demand letter, if you have somebody calling you up, by all means, please talk to that citizen. Please do that.
Linda was pointing to the appearance of impropriety, you know, because it won't be, hey, I talked to her. There'll be a picture posted on Facebook with what they claimed you said underneath. You know, I mean, that's what happens with that. Linda pointed out to me that it's 6:15 and we posted this meeting for citizen input. So we're taking our time with doing this. It's important and we need to do it right, but I want to make sure, are there any citizens that have any comments? And please just line up behind the microphone. We want to make sure you have an opportunity to speak.
Howdy, I'm Linda Curtis with Independent Texans, and I really just want to urge council members to listen to the attorneys in the room, especially what Judge Dugan just said. It's just really helpful, and it will help you do your job, and you're not going to have a lot of complaints from people. Here's the thing I wanted to ask you guys about, and that is why it is that we're hiring, or y'all are hiring an attorney to do this, who's the greatest thing since sliced bread on ethics, and why your city attorney is not doing it. And how much is this going to cost the city? Has there been an allocation, a specific amount of money allocated to do this? Is there a limit to how much you're going to spend on this? And I'm saying this because, as you know, attorney's fees has been a big issue. I think y'all really need to think that through. I hope you are, and I hope you'll speak to that if you can. And because councils, you get into a big problem policing yourselves. That's what you're doing. You're setting up the rules to police yourselves. And we know that that is a problem for the people who are going to be policed. This is a repeated problem, and so if you want to kind of err, you should err on the side of being conservative on these rules. So there have been 10 versions, as the mayor, our breath of fresh air. I really enjoy hearing you talk about things. There are 10 versions. Previous versions. Have the council members taken a look at those? I'd love to see them. I was told, and I have no idea if this is true, but the original version was a very strict ordinance that the council chose to pick at. So if that's not true, I'd love to be
Let me
shown
clarify something.
differently.
What I found was 10 city ordinances.
Okay.
That's what was bound together. And
Okay.
it was back in 2010, I think, and it was like the city of San Antonio, the city
Oh,
of
okay.
San Marcos. Those were the 10 versions. It was 10 different
You
cities.
haven't seen the original version of the cities, the city of Bastrop?
I have not in the last 30 days. I don't know.
'Cause
I
that's what
have
I-
not seen one.
That's what I'm really eager
If I
to
could speak
look
to
at.
that,
Yes, sir.
I was on the original task force to help draft, an attempt to draft. And I guess I ought to issue an apology right now. I have never written ordinances. I've never written litigation. I have been a prosecutor and I've been a judge. I've been in that area of the law. And so what we did was we took a look at a lot of different ordinances to try to get ideas. The task force had some general ideas of what we wanted, because before that, the ethics ordinance, there was nothing. Now, the state law had some prohibitions, but council member, I think, Hart was a very instrumental individual in pushing that project forward. So we looked, because not every ordinance fits the citizens of Bastrop. The ordinance for the city of Dallas would not be appropriate for the city of Bastrop. And so we looked at different ordinances, and we came up, we did the best job that we could. Obviously, there are deficiencies in that. I will very much own up to that. We presented to the council. The council did approve the ordinance that the task force submitted. We did realize that, through recent history, that it needed to be revised. We sat down, we had a work session with the other commissioners, with the city manager, with the city attorney, and we came up and discussed and debated. And let me say, it is up to the council to decide what the ordinance needs to read. That was a recommendation by the commission. And I don't want to speak for the other two commissioners. We will do whatever y'all ask us to do on the commission. That is our charge, whether we think it ought to be this way or that way. Whatever the ordinance ends up with, that is, that we're going to do that. And so that's why I appreciate the public input. That's why I appreciate all the council members' input. And that's why I'm here, I want to go over these values. I want to see what is going to go into this, because we want to follow the ordinance that the council adopts. And so I wholeheartedly apologize to that first version, because I don't write legislation. I don't do that. And nobody else, there's professionals in Austin that do that. I think Mr. Bragg can speak about that with the legislative session, that I guess they're going into special session to do more work. But we tried to make it so it fit the citizens of Bastrop. That was our attempt. That was our goal. And with the recent history, we realized it definitely needed to be corrected.
The other thing that was asked, and I don't know the answer, was the other attorney. I don't know if we've spent money or...
We have a line item for legal fees, and it is budgeted, and this falls under my purview. My comment is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And one of the things that I think is a misnomer is that anybody can practice municipal law. Municipal law is like everything else, and I really do appreciate Judge Dugan saying, I've never written an ordinance before. When you're going to write something that impacts the livelihood, such as it has with Ms. Jones, I think that it is critical that we get the best expertise, and we got the father of ethics ordinances to review this. He had a very limited scope. He read it and offered some very limited perspective that was very valuable, that will provide some clarity. But it falls under legal fees in the budget, that we manage all of the legal costs throughout the year for specific items where it's deemed helpful. And because people lose their job, lose their credibility, and lose their integrity, and all of that tied to this, we really owe it to the citizens, to council, to staff, and to the boards and commissions to get this right. We'll get an invoice for the couple of hours he's invested in this,
Yeah,
and we're done.
And I can speak to that just a bit, Ms. Curtis. I've told a number of people, and I mean this, I don't have the slightest interest in being right as city attorney. I have a compulsion to get it right. And in an area like this, to have Alan participate in helping do that, I think is invaluable for the city. His hourly rate is incredibly reasonable for a person with his background and training. Last year, he conducted 15 continuing education seminars for people on ethics, and he's a friend, which makes it easy to communicate with him. And so for all of those reasons, I think it's probably the best money Bastrop has spent in a long time, and it's not that much.
Could I say something real quick?
Knowing that it's 6:27, you may.
I'll make it real short. Ms. Curtis, were you thinking that we had already approved this first to rewrite our ordinance?
I wasn't sure.
Well, so far, as a council person, I know that while I've been on the council, we have not.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think the only thing we're doing is back to our original conversation. We're trying to put a really good Band-Aid on this, and then how we move forward is something that we would discuss when we do our budget for next year and set priorities and that type of thing. Are there any other citizens that wanted to make a comment or an input or had a question on the ethics ordinance? Do we, and I apologize for not knowing better how to do this, we clearly did not get done.
Yes, ma'am?
So should we schedule another workshop?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you guys like to do the next workshop at, do it at 5 o'clock before our next council meeting? Our next council meeting might be pretty meaty, but this needs to be done. So I just need to know what council wants.
At the next council meeting, we're going to be canvassing election results. We're going to be swearing in a council member, and all that goes with that. And I do think that we've got, while I can't remember all that goes with it, I think there are a couple of items on there. So rather than ending at 8:05, it may go to 9 or 9:30.
Well, would you entertain doing an off week or?
No, well, I think we ought to do this. I really think that we should be consistent. I think
Okay.
if there's stuff that's important to the public, they should know that we're going to take it to a workshop and we're going to do it before the meeting. And I appreciate everything that everybody has to say. I think that's been something we need to do. The citizens have to feel like they have a voice other than just standing up in a meeting and kind of catching everybody off guard, and be able to have this kind of interaction and to be able to count on a time, I think is very important.
Okay, so do you want to do it at the next meeting at 5 o'clock, or do you want to wait until the first meeting in July to have another 5 o'clock workshop?
I think that would make more sense.
I think it makes more sense with a new council member and.
Give the new council member a chance to put feet on the ground.
And with the values that we've set out today, that may give you some direction, and we'll kind of have another flush at that. And the first July meeting is the 11th, I want to say?
Yes, ma'am, it's the
Okay.
week after July 4th.
So it will be posted, but so the public knows, we will have a 5 o'clock workshop to continue the discussion on the ethics ordinance on Tuesday, July 11th, and I'm now going to close the workshop.
I would just, at this point in time, go into recess, and we'll reconvene an open session at the dais.
Exactly what she just said, that's what we're doing. Bear Stage Theater Company, and he is accompanied by Bailey Torcoletti, who is the secretary, and they will be leading us in the pledges. If you'd please stand.
One state, under God, one indivisible,
If you would please remain standing, Johnny Bond will offer the invocation. Johnny comes to us from the Bastrop Church of Christ.
Would you bow with me, please? Our Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening thanking you on the behalf of all of those who are gathered here tonight for your many and abundant blessings, for your measure of health that you have given us to fulfill the callings and sustenance, for the friendship that we have in this room tonight. We thank you for the ability to be involved in the useful work, for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you for the freedom to embrace meetings like these, to express our citizenship. Thank you for loving us, even though we have sinful minds sometimes and we act rashly. We ask that you would give us grace and abundance tonight, that we could not only offer it to ourselves, but offer it to those in which we disagree with. I pray for our mayor, for the various levels of city officials, and for this assembled council, asking that you would grant them wisdom to govern, that you would give them a sense of the welfare and the true needs of the people of Bastrop, that you would give them a thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting, that you would give them the ability to work hard and work closely together in harmony, even when there is disagreement, and that you would give them personal peace in their own lives and joy in the task that they have before them. I ask prayers for the agenda set before them today, and that we would be given an assurance of what would please you and the direction that we should go forth here in the city of Bastrop. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Okay. So we're at item 5, presentations, and I have a proclamation for Juneteenth. And before I read this, I want to speak to Councilmember McAnally is out of the country, that's why she's not here, and Councilmember Peterson is ill. So if you would keep him in thoughts and prayers, we hope he feels better, but he is just really wiped out today, and so he wasn't able to be with us. So, I think we all know that Juneteenth is coming up this weekend. There's several events. Some events started last weekend, and we've got some events coming up this weekend, and I'd like to read this proclamation. Whereas the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, and whereas Texas received word of this proclamation on June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston Island and issued a general order declaring that, quote, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. And whereas this year marks the 154th anniversary of the proclamation, and whereas Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day or Emancipation Day, is an annual holiday originating in Texas and celebrated in over 35 states, the District of Columbia, and internationally. And whereas in 1979, Texas State Representative Al Edwards sponsored House Bill 1016 in the legislature, which was signed by Texas Governor Bill Clements, making Juneteenth an official state holiday in Texas. And whereas the Bastrop Juneteenth Committee is celebrating its 30th year as an organization officially celebrating the event, and whereas the Bastrop Juneteenth Committee partners with the City of Bastrop, Kerr Community Center Board, the Blue Flame Cruisers, and numerous other sponsors, organizations, and individuals who make this event an annual success. And whereas on Saturday, June 17th, 2017, the celebration continues with a grand parade with former City Council member Doc Jackson serving as parade marshal, the Blue Flame Cruiser cars and motorcycle show at Bastrop City Hall parking lot, a variety of family and school reunions that will be held throughout the city, and the ever-popular free street dance in downtown Bastrop. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Bastrop City Council joins Bastrop County Commissioners Court in recognition and celebration of Juneteenth on the 17th day of June 2017 in the city of Bastrop and Bastrop County, Texas. In witness whereof, we hereunto set our hand and cause the seal of the city and county of Bastrop to be affixed to this proclamation. And I'll be passing this out later for all of the council members to sign. The next presentation that we have is about residency requirements, and it causes me to have to speak with clarity and truth and throw myself under the bus for the following thing. After the election, I was thrilled to be mayor-elect, and on Tuesday, May 9th, I caught the city manager right before she came up to the dais and said, remind everybody to fill out their applications for the boards and commissions, but remind them they have to be a resident of the city of Bastrop. And the city manager did exactly what the mayor-elect asked her to do, which was completely wrong, because the residency requirements are different on a number of boards. And I know with the BEDC, I called Sean and said, hey, when you guys adopted your new bylaws, did you have new residency requirements? And he said, as a matter of fact, we did. So that easy question, although the city manager was more than willing to throw herself under the bus and say that she had made a mistake, I wanted everyone to know she got that mistake from me, and we're trying to correct that and trying to bring some clarity, and I'm going to let the city manager present.
Thank you, ma'am. Sometimes the education is mine to take, and tonight I will tell you that I have learned a lot about our, I think we've got 14 or 15 boards and commissions, so very quickly for the public to ensure that we always give the right information, we're going to quickly go through the presentation for you. If I can do that sitting up here, which apparently I'm not going to be able to do. Switch, and I'm not qualified to do that, so let's start with the Bastrop Art and Public Places. One of the great things about this particular board is they essentially handle all matters related to public art and or art and public places, and so one of the great gifts I think we have as a community is our dedication to art. So if this is an interest of yours, this would be a great board. The residency requirements are essentially, you can be a resident, you can live inside the extraterritorial jurisdiction, and it also allows the board to make recommendations if they have an individual that has exceptional expertise, which pretty much means if you're willing to serve in Bastrop and you have an art background, we would be interested in finding a way for you to serve. We have a cemetery advisory board that essentially the city owns a cemetery, and by ordinance we are required to provide perpetual care and upkeep. And so we have an advisory board that oversees the policy recommendations for the council, and that board requires you to live either in the city or the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Our construction standards board reviews new construction codes, also deals, I believe, with some of the variances that come up from time to time. You can read that the board composition requires construction trades, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, or a general contractor. Clearly, these are the trades impacted by these codes, so it's important for us to not have an academic approach to it, but a realistic expectation. So the boards can live in the city or inside the ETJ, but they have to fall into those specific trades. The Bastrop Economic Development Corporation, its jurisdiction for residency requirements comes from the state law. I think there is some ability through the bylaws to moderate that a little bit. But the board shall have a resident from the city of Bastrop. 2 directors can be from the ETJ. 5 members can't be members of the city of Bastrop, and 2 directors could be the mayor or members of the city council. So it is a nice melting pot of options. And then it also requires some qualifications relative to experience, whether it is executive experience, financial, or economic development related. Again, there are some precursors to an appointment. Our Ethics Commission, which we spent our work session dealing with, is that it can consist of 3 members. I know the commission is requesting of the council to increase that to 5. And I don't believe that there is a residency requirement, so you can be a resident or be in our ETJ as well. The Historical Landmark Commission deals with the preservation of our historical landmarks here in town. That does require you to be a resident of the city, and there is some very specific composition of the board. One has to be an architect, planner, or a representative of a design professional, a representative elected by the County Historical Society, a licensed real estate professional, an owner of historic structure or property, an owner of a historical residential structure or property, a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a general resident. So there's some real specificity to this board. The Bastrop Housing Authority are tasked with assisting the city in identifying, filling the needs of low-rent housing. And 4 of the commissioners shall be residents. 1 commissioner can reside within the ETJ for a total number of 5. And it also provides from a board composition that one of the commissioners be at least a resident of the housing. Hunters Crossing LLC is organized for essentially serving on behalf of the city to implement the service plan of the Public Improvement District. The laws are silent, so we're assuming that you have to be a city resident. The Library Board, it essentially deals with the supervision, management, and operations from a policy standpoint of the library, and it requires 8 members, with 1 being appointed from the ETJ. The Main Street Advisory Board has 9 voting members, and they are really about fostering the vision for Bastrop's Main Street program, which is a nationally designated program that has requirements to be followed. I believe that this board, it doesn't speak to, but I believe it allows for business ownership and some other things. I'm looking for Sarah, yes. So this is one that you don't necessarily have to be a resident as well to apply for. Our Parks Board is interested in public parks and public recreation and leisure time. Probably one of the more fun boards to be on. A member of the regular members can be either citizens or out of the ETJ, and it also provides for youth membership. And that is so critically important because we provide programming from cradle to grave. So sometimes young interest is important. Our Planning and Zoning Commission, again, it's silent, so we have made the assumption that that is residents of the city. Our Zoning Board of Adjustment has a very specific charge that is granted to them by the state law, and they have very clear requirements on things that impact variances related to zoning, and that requires citizenship or residency in the city. And then we have a vision task force that has from 7 to 9 members, and again, the ordinance is silent, so we're assuming a citizen residency as well. So Mayor, that is a very quick rundown of our many boards and commissions for public input.
Which also explains why it wasn't a one-word answer when I said, what are the residency requirements? So there are 15 boards and 107 positions, and although we've had some deadlines in the past for the application, you can see that it would be reasonable that there would be citizens that might have been interested in a board but didn't know whether or not they lived in the right place to be able to be on that board. My intention is to have go through all of the applications and make a recommendation for all of the boards at the next city council meeting. However, it's really important that our boards have the very best candidates that we can. So if you are sitting there and one of those boards piqued your interest and you haven't filled out an application, please get your application in. So at this point, we are at the mayor's report. And since May 17th, I've done 35 events. I've been at 4 ribbon cuttings, 5 nonprofit events, and 8 speaking engagements. But one of the coolest things I did was last Saturday. Andreas, are you going to get me a picture? I was a part of the yarn bomb installation. And now you will know that your mayor is a nerd, and yes, I knit. And I was very excited to find out that Bastrop Art in Public Places was going to let Bastrop participate in the annual yarn bomb. So I would like to ask Jennifer Shaw, who we call Jen, if she would please step forward. So this is the entrance of Fisherman's Park going down Farmer. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go by it because it is very cool. And this young lady right next to me came up with the idea, did a majority of the knitting, put everything on the netting, and then we installed the netting on the fence. And so it's very clear to me that it's the Wizard of Oz, and hopefully it's clear to all of you. And because the city of Bastrop is so well defined, guess what the movie is next weekend in the Movies in the Park? Very good. So in honor of the International Yarn Bomb Day, Bastrop Art in Public Places organized its 75 feet long, a tribute to the Wizard of Oz in Fisherman's Park. The project was made possible by the hard work, vision, and dedication of Jennifer Shaw, leading a small group of volunteer knitters. That would be me. The city of Bastrop would like to thank Jennifer for all of her efforts. If you join me in a round of applause. Okay, a couple of other things. Continuing in my nerdiness, I joined the summer reading program, and I'm at 1,020 minutes, so I'm laying down the gauntlet. If anybody else wants to be in the reading program with me, it's a lot of fun. I want to share the shout out for the firefighters. Chief Wobus has asked for a bottled water drive. I think we've all noticed it's gotten really hot lately. They're looking for water and Gatorade, and please contact Chief Wobus if you'd be interested in helping them with that. The Patriotic Festival's coming up, and the Chamber is looking for volunteers, and most of the spots that are left say traffic manager, and that sounds boring, but I was told this morning a golf cart is involved, so it's not that bad. So if you would sign up to volunteer, they would really appreciate that. On Friday, June 23rd, is an event that I did not know previously that we did. It is called Fridays in Motion, and it is for children with autism and their families. It's put on by the YMCA, it's free, and it's June 23rd from 6:30 to 8:30. So if this involves your family or if you know someone that would be involved in that, it is a really neat program, and I would encourage you to participate in that. There's some ribbon cuttings, there's a coffee chat, we talked about the movies in the park. I will remind everyone, including my children who might be watching on TV, Father's Day is coming up. Call your father, do something nice for your father. And on June 25th, there's the Gospel Music Fest at Macedonia First Baptist Church. And there's also the Bastrop County Gospel Extravaganza on June the 24th. And in the future, I will do better and have my mayor's report in a part of the packet. So if you want to stalk me, you will know where I am between the different council meetings. So that is the end of my mayor's report, and now it's council members. I'll start on this side. Councilmember Ennis, do you have anything?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. One thing the mayor left out was that we went to an extensive training session from the Capital Area Council of Governments last Thursday. We learned about types of government, how they work, open meetings and public information basics, agendas, ordinances, resolutions, legislative findings, and ethical issues. And when we walked out, we were like, my Lord, we didn't know the information that we needed in order to do this job. So now we've got it under our belt.
We didn't speak to each other when we drove back because we were scared to.
During the last week, one of the things that our council and our training made a commitment to do was try to attend as many of our board and commission meetings as possible. And so in that light, in the last week, I attended the chamber luncheon, the meeting of the library board, DBA meeting, and the Main Street Design Committee last night. One comment I would like to make is I always appreciate it when there's a chance to recognize our city staff. And this weekend, the electricity went out on Pecan Street on Sunday when everybody's trying to get ready for church. And within seconds, Chief Wobus had his fire folks there checking out to see if there was any danger of fire. And within not much longer than that, our electric folks were there. So I'd like to compliment Chief Wobus and Curtis and his staff for their getting there so quickly and getting the problem corrected. And one other item I wanted to say was that there's been some work being done on Spring Street. And I've had numerous comments from the neighbors over there on how well that work is being undertaken and what little effect it's having on the neighbors over there. And I just wanted to compliment the Public Works Department. Trey, your folks are first class. That's what I have, Mayor.
Great, thank you, council member. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Schiff.
You can address me as Your Highness. Oh. Anyhow, I lost my train of thought. No, I have a very important announcement, and that is, I don't know how you missed it on your list of events. We've got, or unless I missed it, we have a runoff election happening on Saturday. So don't forget to, one, go out and vote yourself, but also to encourage all the citizens of Bastrop to get out and vote for the open city council seat.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. I already voted. I voted early, and I guess the polls closed 30 seconds ago. So if you have not voted, please vote on Saturday. Councilmember Jones.
Okay, well, I attended the Bastrop Museum. They presented a documentary that was prepared by students at the Bastrop High School that did a really beautiful job talking about the process of integration. And I absolutely had no idea that this happened here. I grew up in another country and did not experience that. And so it was just amazing for me to see these people that are, actually I think they're older than me, just a little bit older, and what they went through in the process, and just, it was just amazing, and it was really interesting. But I just also wanted to just point out, based on everything that you're doing, that we're doing, is there a calendar? Because I know that that was something that we were going to work towards, is having a calendar so that you could go to our website, because we've got stuff going on almost every day, and it's just really great stuff. So we're going to be working towards that, and probably, at least trying to get that up pretty soon so that you have quick reference because we do want to start making appearances. All the council wants to be able to participate in all these great events.
Absolutely, Councilmember Jones, thank you. And one of the things we're going to be doing is, Andreas and the guys are working to help us. Our intention is that someone on the dais will be at all of the boards and commission meetings, if at all possible, but we're going to be keeping track of that so we don't accidentally have a quorum at one of them or, have to throw somebody out. But you'll be able to see where we are, and we are trying to get out into the community. And if there's something that you would like us to attend, just let us know, send us an email. We've all got city email addresses. I think our city cell phone numbers are on there. So reach out and touch, and we'll do everything we can to get involved. Does any other council members, did you think of anything else? Just remind everyone, please, please vote if you haven't already. And we are now at City Manager's Report.
Mayor and council, y'all did such an awesome job. I have nothing else to contribute. Thank you.
Continue to do an awesome job. You can take down the picture of Wizard of Oz now. And it is time for us to hear from Sean, Mr. Kirkpatrick on BEDC.
We went with show and tell this month, so thank you, Mayor, Council, for allowing me to come and visit with y'all this month. I'm going to start with something a little unusual. I actually had to go pick up my car from the shop today, and there was Uber available in Bastrop. So I was able to summon it to our office, ride to the shop, collect my car. So if we want to keep it here, folks, if you need it, use it. So it was a little bit of a shock that. So we were in Plano last week, and you probably saw the Facebook post and the article that Andy and them wrote. But the Bastrop EDC and all of our partners, we won the 2017 Workforce Excellence Award from the Texas Economic Development Council for communities in a population under 15,000 for the second annual Youth Career Day last year. And so that is the highest statewide honor from TEDC that you can win in workforce, and we are extremely excited about picking that up, and all the work of the staff and the partners and all of the community that come together to make that event happen every year. We just finished the third annual this school year and already in the phases of planning what the fourth annual is going to look like, as well as our youth programs. We're looking at moving into the middle school as well and having engagement with our community industry leaders with middle school students as they select their career clusters, their career pathways through high school into graduation. What we know is it's people, skills, and jobs. And if we don't have people and they don't have skills, we're not going to have employers creating new jobs. And so working with our youth and those high school students graduating with skills that are staying here, that are employable, it makes our recruiting efforts that much easier and better, and we can fit the employers and the skills that we have together. The other thing that we picked up while we were in Plano is the EDC was recognized in what's called an Economic Excellence Award, which is basically an annual program run by TEDC for meeting a certain performance standards of training and education and knowledge of not only myself and my staff, but also the board and the community. And so this is the third year that we have been recognized for economic excellence by TEDC. So this truly is show and tell, and it just gets bigger as we go along. I'm going to leave this here because I'm going to be back at City Hall tomorrow. Anybody that's to pick it up, anybody that is interested, this is the downtown trail route study that the board had presented last month. We are having a public hearing at the July board meeting, July 17th. It'll be here at City Hall at 6 p.m. The EDC board will be taking public input on that and hopefully taking action to move forward. That project then will come to the City Council in the August meetings to accept that that is an approved project of the EDC. The other thing that we have ongoing that we do quarterly at the EDC in conjunction with Main Street, my other big sign, is we do coffee chat. So 7:30 at the EDC office till about 9 o'clock. We don't kick anybody out, but we actually have to go to work. So come by, have coffee. We'll have breakfast for everybody that shows up. We did one 3 months ago, and folks really come out and enjoy that event and be able to share, ask questions, find out what's going on at the EDC. Our next board meeting is Monday, June 19th at 6 p.m. here in the council chambers. And I do want to give one final thank you to the mayor. She spoke at the Opportunity Austin Investors Breakfast on a panel of mayors last week. And as soon as she was done, I was already getting positive feedback of her participation in that, and to City Manager Humble for driving her at that hour of the day to get down to the Four Seasons in Austin. I am appreciative because we were in Plano collecting hardware. And so thank y'all very much. If y'all have any questions, we're more than happy to answer them.
I would just make sure the audience knows that your coffee chat's Friday.
It is Friday. Friday at 7:30 to 9.
Okay.
In the morning.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Kirkpatrick? All right. Well, we are at 6B. Hear presentation from Visit Bastrop. Interim Director Dale Lockett. Mr. Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. Really appreciate the opportunity to update you on what's happening and the progress with Visit Bastrop. As you know, the Bastrop Destination Marketing Organization, which we do business as Visit Bastrop, was authorized by the council to form DMO to market, promote, and sell Bastrop as a significant leisure destination, along with opportunities for sports groups, conventions, and meetings. About 90 days ago, I was contracted by Bill Geist, president of DMO Pros, to provide consulting services here in Bastrop to the newly formed DMO Starter Board and interface with the city of Bastrop in regards to the formation of your very first DMO. And a lot of progress has been made. Visit Bastrop has been registered as a Texas not-for-profit corporation, along with the registration that's currently in process with the IRS for a 501c6 organization. We've received our EIN tax ID number, and we have formalized our first organizational bylaws. Most important, the Starter Board has now become a full board of 13 volunteers representing specific sectors of the Bastrop's hospitality industry. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce them, and I believe you also have a copy and a listing of who they are. So we'll start with our chairperson, Ann Smarzik. She represents the retail sectors. Our board is comprised of different sectors of the hospitality industry to ensure that there are equal representations of all the things that make Bastrop a great destination. So Ann is the owner of Relics on Main Street, and again represents retail. Cindy Wolford Gensel is a board member representing the history sector, and she represents the Bastrop County Historical Commission. Nasim Kasari is a board member, and she represents one of our at-large position, and she is the owner of the Lost Pines Art Bazaar. Robert, or Bob Jones, is a board member representing the sports sector, and he is with the Bastrop ISD as the athletic director, and it's a great exciting thing to have the sports sector with the Bastrop ISD being represented. Kevin Lee Plunkett is a board member. He represents the restaurant sector, and he's the owner of Piney Creek Chop House. Brenda Abbott is a board member. She represents the venues and special events, and she is owner of the Brenda Abbott Floral. Sean Antherplesh is a member at large, and she is owner of the Pecan Street Inn. Jamie Creasy is representing the outdoors and recreation, and she is the general manager of the Bastrop State Park. David Jacobs is a board member representing the Hyatt Lost Pines Resort board position, and he is the general manager of the Hyatt. Haran Patel is the secretary of the organization. He represents the hotels and lodging sector, and he's the owner of the Holiday Inn and Suites. We have Tom Scott, who is a board member representing an at-large position. He is a citizen, but one with quite a stellar history in this community. Brings a lot of history into the board. Rick Brackett is treasurer. He represents the nightlife and entertainment sector. He's the owner of Neighbor's Kitchen and Yard. Clint Howard is a board member. He represents the arts sector, and he's owner of Deep in the Heart of Art Foundry. And of course, the last position would be myself. I'm ex officio, it means I do not have a vote, and I am your interim CEO. At this time, I would like to ask the Visit Bastrop board members who are here to please stand and be recognized. They have a lot of work ahead of them. We'll have our first full board meeting on this Thursday, and on the agenda is the process to identify and add ex officio positions, such as city liaison as an ex officio. Yesterday, we had a board orientation half-day meeting facilitated by Bill Geis to ensure that our board is up to date on the latest issues pertaining to DMO boards and receiving some of the best practices in the nation regarding the critical role of board leadership. I would also report that we have reached an agreement in principle to co-locate with the Main Street program in the Lakey House. It's a historic building just adjacent to the convention center. This agreement enables Visit Bastrop to accelerate our operational process and enables us to start marketing Bastrop quicker than if we had to establish a new location. So I'd like to thank Sarah for being willing to co-locate and share her offices with us. As soon as the contract between Visit Bastrop and the city have been approved by council and by the Visit Bastrop board, I will begin the process of full budget development, establish our financial processes, and many more operational functions. Most important, however, is we will begin the process of finding the best and the brightest of people to be able to come in and sell and market this great destination. I've conducted an analysis on various websites that currently market our destination, and we'll have a plan to facilitate and focus a consistent message and brand under the Visit Bastrop URL, which is www.visitbastrop.com. I've also initiated a starter meeting and an advisory group consisting of David Dubois, President and CEO of the International Exhibitions and Events Association. His members represent thousands of trade shows, exhibitions, and events worldwide. Joining David is Mike Williams. Mike is president of Summit Conferences and Incentives, also known as SCI. SCI is a third-party meeting planning company that currently books over 200 meetings throughout the United States and internationally. As a side note, Mike has already booked a good-sized piece of business out at the Hyatt Lost Pines Resort, and David is considering bringing his international board of directors to a board retreat here in Bastrop. One of the things that they did is they toured our convention center and many other elements of our destination, and they met with, thank you very much for your time, the mayor and our city manager for a fairly extensive discussion of both the challenges and the opportunities that we have. An advisory board is exceptionally important, or advisory group is exceptionally important, of industry leadership people to be able to give us their thoughts, their ideas about how we can move our product, whether it's in leisure tourism or it's in conventions and meetings, forward. I want you to know I've truly enjoyed getting to know Bastrop in the past 90 days and meeting so many new friends and acquaintances here. The hospitality industry, tourism, is one of Bastrop's most significant industries. I'm confident that we can further maximize the economic impact through a focused use of the hot taxes, the hotel occupancy taxes, with a laser focus on how we market and communicate our assets and the tremendous opportunity that we have to get people to come here and not go someplace else, and to get that crucial visitor spending, which creates sales tax dollars in this community. It helps our quality of life as citizens in this community. I'd have you consider this. Envision a checklist of Bastrop's assets that we can use to increase overnight visitation. So let's start. River rafting, kayaking, and stand-up paddleboarding, check. Lost Pines, check. Historic Main Street with restaurants, shopping, and nightlife, check. Zip lining, check. That might surprise some people. World-renowned resort with horseback riding, river activities, outstanding golf, tennis, and more, check. Moonshine and vodka distillery, double check. Museums and art galleries, check. Unequaled Texas history, check. Opry House, check. Great wedding venues, check. Rodeo, check. Meeting venues, check. Eclectic shop and people, check. How about bass, boots, and barbecue? Double check. We've got it. And the list goes on. That's only just a small list. I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited about the progress of having a full board established, our bylaws done, and moving forward in this destination. You're going to be hearing a lot more. Most important, everybody outside of Bastrop that has the potential to come visit is going to hear a heck of a lot more about your great city and the great destination. Thank you very much, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Dale. Any questions, council? I really want to tell the board members how much I appreciate it. You do have a lot of work ahead of you, and you're all in the business, and you know what you've got ahead of you, and you said yes anyway. So I appreciate that, and the whole city's counting on you. So thank you very much, Dale, and best of luck to you guys. We're looking forward to the things that you're going to be able to bring people to our city. Yes, Councilmember Ennis?
As someone who served on the board that, whatever we called it, the 5 people that chose the starter board, I want to say how excited and pleased that I am with all of y'all and where you're going, and that it's finally here. Congratulations. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. We're now at 7 at citizen comments. I was going to say I don't have any, but apparently I do. Pamela Aldridge.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman.
Good afternoon.
And everyone behind me. I just want to address to y'all about this weekend's event that's going on. I am the president of the Bastrop Juneteenth, and I am looking forward to everything that's going on. Look like we are heading in the right direction this year, especially with the city's help. I want to say thank y'all. All right, another thing I want to say, these are some of the things that are going on in Bastrop this weekend, and some of the things that have gone on that we've never done before, and we have really enjoyed trying this out. This past weekend, we had a band over at Kerr Center. Great night, enjoyed it. The best band we have heard in a long time. And the band's name, The Evolution. This coming up weekend, we have Friday night, we will have a banquet at the Hampton Inn, and we will be honoring 17 Bastrop community people. And we will also be serving dinner to everyone, and we want everyone to know how proud we are of these citizens that we will be honoring. And it is called Honoring These People in the Name of Excellency. Also, we will be having on Saturday, 10 o'clock a.m., a parade downtown Bastrop, starting from Fisherman's Park. From there, we will go down to the Kerr Center by 11:30. We will be having the Emancipation Program there. You just read the Emancipation, and also Councilman Peterson will be reading that Emancipation at the program. Also, we will have a lot of fun things for the kids to do this year, and we're so happy because this has never happened. And like I said, a lot of this is due to the city coming in and joining with us this year. And we are also going to have vendors there that we've always offered vendors to people to come and set up. No one ever came. But this year, we're getting calls galore, and we're so happy about that. And then Saturday night, everyone is invited to the Bastrop Street Dance, downtown Bastrop. All You Need Band will be there. So we are just looking forward to having fun, fun, fun. And we want everybody to know about this. And this is something that is celebrated, every year in the month of June, the 3rd Saturday of the month. And we just want everybody to know. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we want y'all to also know, I am the face that have been talking to some of y'all on the phone who have said, well, I don't know who she is or what she wants, but this Pam Aldridge is steady calling. That is me. I am trying to get out there to everyone, to let everyone know. Come join us, please. We want everybody's help. We want feedback. We want you to just come and be enthused in doing everything that we are doing. And we want everybody to be happy and come together. Because this is a time for Bastrop to have fun. Come together. for family, all types, kids as well as the elders, I meant to say. But anyway, we just want everybody to just come and enjoy and have fun. So y'all come out and help, still participate, and please, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aldridge. Okay, we are now at number 8 at the consent agenda, and I'll ask the city secretary to read the items, but first I'd like to know, does any council member want any item pulled? Seeing none, Madam Secretary?
The following is the consent agenda. Item 8A, consider action to approve minutes from the May 23rd, 2017 regular council meeting. Item 8B, consider action to approve Resolution R 201735 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, approving a final plat for Pecan Park 3A, being 12.181 acres within the Moselle Rose Survey A-56, located west of the Childers Drive extension and south of the 100-foot wide LCRA easement within the city limits of Bastrop, Texas, and providing an effective date. Item 8C, consider action to approve Resolution R 201736 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, approving a final plat for Pecan Park 6A, being 10.913 acres within the Moselle Rose Survey A-56, located west of the Childers Drive extension and south of the 100-foot wide LCRA easement within the city limits of Bastrop, Texas, and providing an effective date. That concludes the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The city manager pointed out to me that part of our process is to see if any citizen would like to have an item pulled. So I want to make sure I give that opportunity. Seeing none, I'm ready to take a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Schiff,
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones.
Yes. Thank you. We're now on to items for individual consideration. We're at 9A, and we're going to hold a public hearing and consider action to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2017-17, granting a conditional use permit to allow a manufactured home at 1103 Cedar Street, being 0.289 acres of building block 20 east of Main Street, setting out conditions, establishing an effective date, and move to include on the June 27, 2017 agenda for second reading. We'll hear a presentation from staff, and then I'll open the public hearing.
Thank you very much, Mayor Council. This item is a request by Ms. Helen Juarez for a conditional use permit to allow a manufactured home at 1103 Cedar Street, which is between Fayette Street and Hill Street, just across the street from the Bastrop High School parking lot. This request is a little different in that the property already had a mobile home on the property. Apparently there was some damage that was caused to the existing home by a tree located behind the property, and the new manufactured home was moved into the property without acquiring any of the necessary permits to move the property on there. And so once we realized that it was there, we put a stop work order on the property and requested that the property owner move forward with acquiring the necessary permits to be able to locate the home there. They have fully complied with that. They have, Ms. Juarez has not lived in the home while we go through this process, and so they're here today to request approval of that conditional use permit. They received a unanimous recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting last month. And in your packet, you'll see the staff report that we provided them that discusses what a conditional use permit is and the conditions that are applied to those types of permits. Planning and Zoning Commission also provided some other recommendations to be placed on the permit, and in your packet on the first page and second page there's a list of those conditions. And so most of them are pretty self-explanatory. They all, for the most part, fall in line with what the standard requirements are for a conditional use permit. A couple of those that I'll point out is a building permit is typically required before the home is moved onto the property. Since this building has already been moved on the property, we did recommend shortening the time frame that's normally allowed to secure those permits. There was also a condition that the accessory structures and other debris that were in the back of the property be cleaned up within a reasonable amount of time. There were some other conditions that apply to the condition of the new home. It includes making sure that the roof is structurally sound, that the skirting around the bottom of the home is cleaned and reattached and in good order. There's also a requirement, because this is in the neighborhood character zone of our form-based code area, that a front porch be installed in front of the home. We recommended that it be a minimum of 100 square feet, just so it can provide a little more of a substantial curb appeal in that area. There's also some covered parking and landscape requirements that are part of that. This is, as Mayor, as you stated, this is a public hearing. There was a public hearing held at the Planning and Zoning Commission. We did not receive any comments during that public hearing. And this is an ordinance, and so if you choose to approve the ordinance tonight, it will go to the next council meeting for its second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Council, do you have any questions for staff before we open the public hearing?
Does Ms. Juarez agree with the conditions?
She does. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we are prepared to open the public hearing, and if anyone has anything they would like to say, you need to fill out. Do we have any requests, Madam Secretary? I have to officially open the public hearing. So we're officially opening the public hearing, and we have no one that has filled out any notice to speak. So we are officially closing the public hearing, and I will take a motion.
I move that we approve this on first reading and that it be put on the consent agenda for the next meeting.
I have a motion. I'm looking for a second. I second. I have a second from Councilmember Jones. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Shipp?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brandon. And we're happy for Mrs. Juarez. We're now on 9B, consider action to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2017-15, amending the Code of Ordinances by amending Article 4.03, taxi cabs, shuttles, and touring vehicles, providing the requirements of operating a taxi cab, shuttle, and touring vehicle, and designating the city manager or his or her designee to enforce all requirements, approving a repealing cause, establishing an effective date, and move to include on the June 27th, 2017 agenda for a second reading. Chief Adcock.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We've been working on this for quite some time, and right when we thought we had it all good, the state threw a curveball and changed the law. And as Sean said earlier about Uber, Uber's now in Bastrop, and I'll get into that in just a minute on some of the laws. When I presented this last time, it was a little confusing, and that's my fault. And so I wanted to step back and go back and start at the beginning instead of in the middle. And so that's what I've done. Thanks to the city manager, we've created this PowerPoint, and so hopefully it'll clarify things. On the dais, there should be, because of the update, And after meeting with our city attorney, I have had to add a definition, so y'all have the current one that it should be sitting on your dais, so that it will be just a little bit of a
Council, you
tweak.
guys all have it? Okay, great.
Okay. Okay, the way this is set up, we have the current ordinance on the left and then the proposed change on the right, and then the policy consideration is down below. I'm not going to bore you with reading all the policy considerations, but if you have any questions, let me know. The current policy says that, this is our current ordinance, if you are temporarily coming through the city, you do not have to have a permit. What we're proposing is that, just like the city of Austin, if you are operating inside the city, you have to have a permit to operate a taxi cab. That's the first change. The second change is, this is one of them that's on your new one, the fact that David Bragg realized that we didn't have a definition of what a taxi was in our ordinance. So we have put the ordinance in, what a taxi cab is, and that came from the from the Federal Transportation Code. So he asked that we put that in there, so that's that. This is just cleaning it up, because all throughout this ordinance, some places it says the city manager, some places it says the chief of police, and so we've cleaned it up to be city manager or his or her designee. So you'll see that all throughout, but that's all that is.
Which I will tell you will be the police chief.
Yes, it will be. The next one is, what this is the current ordinance says that you have to have fixed permanently to a vehicle, to the taxi, 2.5-inch letters. What we're proposing is leave that in there, but also just add the word magnetically, because a lot of people use their own personal vehicles for taxis. We're not talking about Uber. And when they're off duty, they don't want to be earmarked or possibly be trying to be flagged down. And so we've said that they can have the magnetic signs. So we've just added magnetically on that. This is where there was some confusion. On this one, the current ordinance gives me pretty much no grace. If you've ever been convicted of certain offenses, you can never operate a taxi cab inside the city of Bastrop, and that's not fair. We don't need to punish folks forever for something that they did. And so what we've done, we've come through here, and we did model this after the city of Austin's. We've actually lined it out on the different convictions, and it specifically says, if you were convicted of this, you can't drive a taxi for this amount of time. So it's a lot clearer, and it gives some grace to folks that might have made a mistake, so they won't be not able to operate a taxi from now on inside the city of Bastrop. Okay, this is where we've decided that in order, when you get a permit, we've added the fact that we're going to issue you a permit. That's more of an operational aspect, but that way for police, we'll be able to see that you are current. This section, after visiting with city manager and the Tracy Waldron, we found that this section doesn't even need to be in the ordinance anymore. State law addresses this, so we took out the ad valorem stuff. And that is it. What questions do you have of me?
Councilmember Jones? Okay, so you're indefinitely unable to, you can never drive a taxi in Bastrop if you've had a felony conviction. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. I thought we were giving grace here, so I don't understand that. But how do these guidelines compare to Austin's?
This is Austin's guidelines, these right here. Unless they've made some changes.
How do they compare to Uber's?
I have no clue. Uber regulates it themselves. I do not know what Uber does.
How about carts?
I don't know what CART does.
So when you first brought this to us, I thought the idea was that you didn't really want, am I not misunderstanding, you didn't really want to deal with the taxi situation?
Or is it just because it was so unclear? Is that why you didn't want to deal with it, and now we're told that you're going to be dealing with it?
It is very vague. The current one on the left is very vague. It says no person may drive any taxi if they've been convicted of an alcohol or drug offense that could affect his ability. Is that a DWI 1, DWI 2, intoxication, manslaughter? There's not a for sure. And then it throws in a little catch-all, or fitness required to perform the duties or possess a threat to the public. What is a threat to the public? Our charter says that the city council is the one who regulates taxi cabs. Okay. And so that's why I'm bringing it to y'all.
So the reality is that Uber can come in and their guys can run here, and we have our own citizens that we're going to regulate, but we don't know what their rules are.
Well, the Uber can use our own citizens as well, if that's what you're asking.
So it might be that since Uber's here, it seems like it would make more sense to just encourage people to work under Uber, because they would be doing all the checks, they would be doing all the organization. I mean, it would just take one more thing off one more duty away that, because
yes, ma'am. Are you saying then just ban all taxi cabs and only use Uber?
Not necessarily, because I do know that there are people that provide really great service and I'm thinking of one person in particular who is on speed dial for several people that I know that are younger that go downtown and drink, and give them a ride home after, they've been out. If they've had a drink, that's who they call. And I think that's a great service, that they're providing. So I'm just saying that it seems like if Uber's here, if it's so easy, if they've got that, it seems like we might want to have a couple of things, that we might want to encourage people to do that, just because it kind of makes everything uniform. And maybe the whole taxi thing, there might be different things that fall under that, like maybe the lady that drives DWI, I don't know how that works, is Uber, or the minivan she drives, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I guess the other thing I'm just kind of interested in is just the whole carts, what their guidelines are, and maybe even the possibility of people operating through carts. And the reason I'm thinking about this is just because I know how many responsibilities that you have. And if there's a way that we can put it into a program that already exists, that just seems like it would be a good direction for us to go. And the other thing is that what about the responsibility of business owners who have drivers, and the drivers that are employed by them taking responsibility for those drivers?
They're not taxis.
So they don't fall under this ordinance. For example, if you're running a taxi service within your business where you take your customers to and from one destination to the other, that doesn't put you into this ordinance?
That's a shuttle service.
Yes. So that does put you into this?
Yes. The shuttle service, yes, if that's what you're talking about, yes.
Mm-hmm. I think his point was if your daughter gives you a ride to the airport, that's not a taxi.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about shuttle services, like the airport shuttle or the DWI shuttle,
then
for lack of a better term.
That falls under this ordinance, is that correct,
Yes,
Chief?
that's correct.
Because I do know, I'm just going to say, I've gotten phone calls from citizens that this ordinance would directly affect them, and that's of great concern. And I know that it was presented at the meeting when y'all first brought this up, that our citizens are in the back seat and we need to protect them. But I say our citizens are in the front seat too, and they need to have employment opportunities. So I guess what I would like to see is, and I know you've worked a lot on this, but I would like to see how the whole thing with Uber impacts this, and the possibility of shifting that way, and then also just knowing what the guidelines are for the cart service, and maybe looking at having the shuttles register under carts, or something where we just kind of shift that responsibility into an existing program, away from us. That's what I'm interested in looking at.
Mayor, could I make a comment on one thing that Councilmember Jones said? we would be on thin ice if we tried to do anything to discourage the operation of legitimate taxi cab businesses in Bastrop, particularly if we were trying to push people toward the Uber type of thing. And so I would strongly recommend against doing that. And Chief, maybe you could explain House Bill 100 and how that kind of fits into the Uber question.
Sure. House Bill 100, which is why we had to make a few changes, specifically is for Uber and Lyft. Basically, if you prearrange a digital ride through Uber's system, we are not allowed in any form or fashion to regulate you. This new law went into effect 2 weeks ago. So therefore, if you are Uber or you are Lyft, King's X, we can't touch you. So in that case, if like what Sean was saying earlier, the Uber person that came through, that's the first I've heard of any Uber ride inside the city of Bastrop. I have not heard that yet. So it is new with Uber here. And if you're a taxi, and that's why we added the definition of what taxi is, we can regulate you for the safety of our citizens. Uber has regulations based on state law. I do not know what those are because we can't regulate them. We don't have anything to do with Uber. So I don't know if it says that if you have a felony, I don't know that.
So Chief Adcock, for clarity for me, I think what I hear you saying is in an Uber situation, it's a buyer beware. We don't have any ability because of House Bill 100. We have no rights over that. And if, as a consumer, if they want to do business with Uber, they make that choice. If you are a citizen of Bastrop and you want to utilize a taxi service, this ordinance assures you what you're getting, that their vehicles is up to par, whatever, all of the things that are included in the ordinance, you'll know that they're permitted, and a consumer can choose to use what they want. But if someone's presenting themselves, if you have a visitor on Main Street and you flag down a cab that's marked as a cab, you will know that it's in compliance with this ordinance. Am I clearly understanding that?
And you will know that you've been vetted through the city of Bastrop. Uber, when you use Uber, they've been vetted through Uber. What their requirements are, I do not know.
Mayor and council, I just want to reiterate something that the chief said. The charter specifies what your role is, and then there are about 16 things that it enumerates specifically. And believe it or not, the taxi cab, shuttle, and what's the other component of this taxi cab shuttles?
Touring vehicles.
Touring vehicles is specified separately. So this isn't a case of what staff wants or not wants to do and whether or not the chief wants this or not. The charter, by definition, gives you the responsibility to do this. We just will enforce at your leisure. So this isn't about whether or not we want to do it. It's whatever you choose by charter to do, we'll be happy to enforce.
And then, City Attorney, I believe part of why there was a definition for the taxi cab is because once you get into a bus and more than 8 passengers, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct, but there was another reason for it as well, and that is state law specifically says that to be an Uber vehicle, you cannot be a taxi cab. But we had not defined what a taxi cab is in Bastrop, and so we added a definition of taxi cab to make it clear that we were not in conflict with state law. Instead, we are enforcing taxi cab as we are authorized to do under the charter.
My observation is we've spent a substantial amount of time on an issue that I don't believe is an issue for the city. Do you anticipate spending an inordinate amount of time to enforce this ordinance when I don't think there are many people active in the taxi cab business?
It is becoming an issue. We have had multiple calls on it. That's the whole reason why I brought it to y'all's attention.
I'm not saying that we don't need to do the ordinance or fix it and make it right. But I think once we've established it, are you expecting to spend a lot of time dealing with taxi cabs?
No.
That's what I'm thinking.
Because at that point,
I'm just saying,
we'll enforce
why
it,
don't
but
we
at that
just
point,
approve
we'll know.
this, get it moving, and let's move on with life? I don't see why we're making such a big issue out of it.
I think Mayor Pro Tem Schiff is pretty clear. Councilmember Ennis, was there anything you'd like to add?
I have only one question, and it's to our attorney. I take it that the state has taken the burden of regulating Uber and those kind of digitally ordered rides off of the city's back. So bottom line, they take the responsibility for any kind of suit, et cetera, et cetera. Does what we're trying to do here is do our responsible duty in protecting our citizens and the city by instituting these regulations, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the state made it clear through House Bill 100, they don't want cities anywhere near Uber. It was, if you read the floor debate for that bill, it was a purely economic debate. Those supporting the taxi industry, those supporting the Uber industry. Some discussion of safety, but not much. It was clearly more of an economic thing. But they made it clear cities stay out of this. But they also made it clear that if you are a taxi cab, you're not an Uber vehicle or a Lyft vehicle. And it's all tied to digitally prearranged rides. You can't flag down an Uber vehicle. You can't call them on the telephone. It's all got to be digitally prearranged. So the state takes that. We have nothing to do with it. We keep taxi cabs.
Well, Mayor, I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. I'm fine with this, and I think we ought to move on.
I have one citizen comment. Chief Adcock, is that?
Yes, ma'am.
I have one citizen comment from Debbie Moore.
Just very briefly, Mayor and council members, and I wanted to speak to your bringing up carts. It's not really an option because carts operates on either a fixed route or a demand response where it's already, the rides are called in based on certain criteria. So you couldn't call them up today and say, I need a ride at 8 o'clock. It wouldn't work. So it's not viable. Just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. All right, I am ready to take a motion.
I move for adjournment.
Can we go ahead and take care of 9B before we?
Ready for that? I thought we
Mayor Pro Tem.
we're moving ahead here.
Motion for
I'm sorry.
9B.
We'll move that we approve this ordinance and put it on the agenda on the, yeah.
What it says there in front of you.
Yeah.
All right.
Where is it?
Do I have a second?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Schiff,
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones.
No. Okay. We have a 2-1 vote. It passes. We have no executive.
I now move for adjournment.
Does it pass?
No, it doesn't. It takes at least 3.
Okay, so it fails. So we will bring this back. We have no executive session, and now, Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll move for adjournment the third time.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.